Welcome back, everyone. When was the last time you were truly stopped by something beautiful? Not just noticed it, but actually stopped, felt quiet inside, felt something with no name, a sunset, piece of music, moment in nature where everything landed. And then, almost immediately, the mind came back, naming it, describing it, already moving on. Tolle says, those moments of stillness are not random. They're not accidents, and understanding what they actually are changes everything about how you see your own mind. By the end of this video, we will have ways to access that stillness on purpose, not just by accident. So please stay tuned. In the previous video, we discovered that presence cannot be reached by thinking. We found it in the gap between thoughts, using the cat and mouse hole experiment. We found that the body as an anchor. We saw two kinds of waiting, one that rejects the present and one that is completely, quietly alive in it. And now we go even deeper. Tolle introduces a word from Zen tradition, Satori. Don't let it sound unfamiliar. It simply means a sudden flash of no mind, a brief moment when thinking completely stops and we are just here. And Tolle says, most of us have had these moments many times. Maybe you were walking somewhere and a bird landed nearby, or you just stopped, watched. The mind went completely quiet for a second. Or a piece of music hit something in you and for a few bars, everything else disappeared. These moments, these are Satori, the flashes of pure presence. Here's what actually is happening. We are perceiving something directly, without the filter of labels and interpretations. Not, oh, look at a bird. Just the aliveness of that experience itself. But what happens almost immediately after? Mind rushes in. That was beautiful. I should tell someone. I should take picture. And the moment that happens, the direct experience is gone. Now we only have a memory of it. The experience was only alive in the gap before thought arrived. And this is how Tolle measures depth of consciousness. The wider the gap between perception and thought, the more conscious a person is. Most of us have very narrow gaps, but here's the hopeful part. This gap can widen through practice. And in that space, life becomes more vivid, more real. Here's something interesting. This leads to something that might surprise you about beauty itself. Tolle says, something direct here. He says most people are so identified with their minds that the beauty of nature doesn't really exist for them. Now we might push back on that. Of course, I appreciate nature. I love a good walk. But Tolle is pointing at something very precise. He says many people look at a flower and say, "What a pretty flower," and move on. That is just a mechanical, mental label. The mind ticked the box and moved to next thing. They saw the flower, but they didn't see it. They didn't feel its aliveness. Think about the difference between looking at something and truly seeing it. Have you ever just stopped in front of something ordinary? A tree, a light through a window, and just looked. Without naming, without comparing. And if you have, you know the difference. There is a contact, aliveness. Tolle says the mind can neither recognize beauty nor create it. Only presence can. Now Tolle takes us somewhere even deeper. He says, when you become conscious of being, something remarkable happens. Being becomes conscious of itself through you. The vast aliveness that underlies everything becomes aware of its own existence through the act of your presence. And in the timeless realm, the Alpha and Omega are eternally present as one. Beginning and end, held in single eternal now. Everything that exists has been. Everything carries in some form the essence of consciousness. A stone, a plant, an animal, a human, not as equal level of awareness, but as different expressions of the same one aliveness wearing different costumes. That brings us to the most fascinating ideas of the entire book. The ancient seers of India called existence Leela, the divine game. Not a trivial game, but a vast, creative, joyful outpouring of consciousness into form. Look at the variety of lives on this planet. Millions of forms, each one temporary, each one a unique expression of that same underlying aliveness. Tolle says the individual forms are not really the point of this game. In the ocean, tiny creatures live for minutes. A human form, compared to the age of the universe, is a breath. Think of a fish in the aquarium. We name it, give it a birthday. 2 minutes later, another fish eats it. That feels devastating, but only because we treated a temporary moment in a vast living flow as if it were permanent, separate thing. The consciousness expressing itself through that fish. It never ends, it simply moves, changes forms, continues the games. And this points towards something in us that is deeper than any story, any name, any form, something that was here before all of it. Tolle now brings us all of this together through one of the most well-known stories ever told. A parable of the lost son. A son leaves home, spends everything, falls into total destitution. And it is only through the pressure of suffering, and there's nothing left, and he finally turns around and goes home. Tolle says this maps the journey of consciousness itself. It begins in unconscious perfection, a natural, unthinking wholeness, like a young child simply living. Then consciousness descends into form, into thought, ego, time, and completely loses itself. Forget what it actually is. That is, says Tolle, the current state of the humanity. But the pressure of suffering eventually forces something, a stepping back, a searching, a question the mind cannot answer. And then something beautiful, he says. Simply watching the mind, just being the observer of your own thoughts, that is already the beginning. When we watch the mind, consciousness begins to withdraw from the form it got lost in. The watcher grows stronger. The noise begins to loosen. That is the journey back home. Tolle says the egoic mind, the collective egoic mind, the humanity completely identified with thought, is the most dangerous, insane, and destructive entity ever to inhabit the planet. When consciousness is completely convinced it is only the name, a body, a set of opinions, it lives in constant fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, and that fear multiplied across billions of people is what derives the conflict, the suffering we see in the world. So Tolle says egoic mind has become like a sinking ship. If we don't get off it, we go down with it. And getting off doesn't mean abandoning our lives, it means something immediate and personal. No longer believing completely and without question that we are only this story, this personality. Allowing the watcher to grow stronger than the noise by becoming aware. So here's my question for you this week. Think of a recent moment when something stopped the mind, even briefly, a beautiful sight, a piece of music, a sudden stillness. What was it? Please tell us in the comments. So the free 30-day journal is in the description with a simple daily prompt to take this even deeper. It's completely independent, today's video, but quietly supports the whole practice. Our Power of Now practice app is also coming soon. Gentle daily prompts, a quick mindfulness journal. So link in the description when it launches. So if this is resonating, please hit like. It helps more people find this series. In the next video, we arrive at the final and most practical teachings, including the one, gateway into presence, that is always available, no matter where you are. So please hit subscribe. We'll see you there.